Welcome to the digital camera functions for third spaces for the middle school project. All right, so today we're going to be talking about different digital camera functions while taking photos for our third space project. This is a really cool project to learn how a digital camera works and the different settings and how to manually set those settings. It's really good for your future use if you would like to hop into digital photography, whether that's as a profession or even just as an amateur taking photos. So we're gonna hop right into this and start talking about just how to set the camera, take photos, and what it's like and how they'll turn out to be. Alrighty, and here we have our camera, our SD card, and our battery pack. Starting from the top, that little black box that says Canon on it, that is your battery pack. You always need that in order to take photos with your camera because the camera will not turn on if you do not have that battery pack. Right below that, you have your SD card. That is probably the most important thing to use for the camera because that holds your photos, all your videos, whatever you have. So you absolutely need that in order to take photos. Some cameras will take photos the whole time, and then at the end you realize it has no card in it. So you always need to make sure you always have that SD card in your camera, and we'll show you how to put that in there at the end of this video. And then you have the main camera. That is your camera is your big tool with all the different settings and manual functions on it, kind of laying out the different styles and modes and settings you can use to take your digital photo. Now, it's not as intimidating as it looks once you get going with it. It's okay to ask questions and get to know the camera. Now, moving on to the different functions of the camera. So the highlighted bits are what you want to focus on for this unit. You want to focus on your main dial, your shutter button, your flash button, and your mode dial on top of the camera. And there's this little sheet in front of you explaining what those do, and we'll talk about that afterward. On the back, you have your cross keys and set button, and then you have your play button, and then your um, quick correction button. Now, we'll go over these on the sheets in person, but this is just a little layout of what each button does and why it's important and what you need to know for now. There's also a knowledge for later little section there that you can look up on your own time, but it's not needed for necessarily this lesson. All right, so our next bit here is on the actual screen of the camera and what goes in to taking a photo in manual mode. Manual mode is what we're going to be working on for this entire project. So no other mode should be messed with or tried to be attempted. Only have manual. If you have that M in the top left-hand corner of the camera screen, you're in the right mode. Anything else, it's incorrect. So what manual means is that you will be adjusting everything manually, or you will be yourselves adjusting it and not the camera. So that's what that M means in the top corner for your mode. Now, you also have shutter speed. Shutter speed is the rate at which the shutter stays open and the more time the light has to add exposure to the photos. You have little sheets in front of you that explain that and explain how it works. So you can always follow along with that if you're ever lost beyond this video. Okay, moving on to our aperture and f-stop. The definition reads, controlling the amount of light that enters through the lens by the size of the lens. This feature also controls the depth of field, meaning how much the photo's background is blurred or in focus. Now, the smaller your lens is, or in other words, how the smaller your aperture is, the smaller the lens will be to capture what's in there, and it will blur the background and focus in on the main image. Now, if it's more open, it'll focus on more of the background and capture more of the details of the background. That if the larger your aperture is. So the larger the number, more of the background's in it. The less the number, more of the background is blurred. Now, moving on to ISO. The definition reads in the right-hand corner of your sheet. It says, the lens sensitivity to light. The higher the ISO, the more sensitive to light it will be, meaning more light will enter the photo. Now, if you feel like your photos are super bright and you don't know why, you probably got too high of an ISO. And this image you see, 6,400 is a pretty high ISO. So you're probably going to want to lower your cameras down if it's at that high because you can get super bright photos and you're not going to know why the whole screen is white when you're outside. It's probably because your ISO is way super high. It's taking in too much light. All right, and the last thing, guys, we want to talk about is our image quality. You'll see there in the bottom of your camera, in the bottom right-hand corner, is the little L with a little curve on it. That stands for JPEG. JPEG is a file type, And what that means is that when you shoot the photo, it's already adjusted by the camera, and there's not much editing that needs to be done. And so it's a smaller file type. If it's in RAW, it will be a larger file type because it's looking to edit the photos, and all the data will be saved to the photos. We're not going to be shooting in RAW because we're not going to be editing the photos afterward in Photoshop or Lightroom. We're only going to be doing it on the camera, so we don't need to worry about that. All right, so now we're moving on to how to take photos in different settings and areas. So if we're going to take it inside, where it's lighting like light bulbs or fluorescent lighting, or all those kind of things, you're gonna want to have these settings on your camera. Again, it's manual. You'll have your shutter speed a little lower and your aperture a little lower as well, and your ISO about at 800. That'll help capture things with the lighting that's coming in, both from outside and from the lighting that's in the building. That's kind of artificial. You want to make sure that your settings are set to that way. And right there, you'll see at the bottom where it has a little down below between the M has a little setting there with a filter. You guys don't want to mess with anything like that. Anything below that you don't want to mess with. Now, moving on to outside. In shaded areas where the sun's not really shining, you're going to want to have certain settings that apply to that. And so on the camera, again, you want to be shooting in manual. I apologize for my phone part right there, but that's okay. You want to have a higher shutter speed and a little higher aperture, but a little lower ISO to adjust for that lighting. You know, so the camera can capture the light that's coming in, but also not too much of it. Um, and so you want to make sure all your stuff's on auto and not touch anything below that first line of settings. You want to make sure that nothing's being touched there because then it might mess up how you're being a photo's being taken. Now, in more sunny areas where the light's really hitting and shining bright, you're going to want to make sure your settings are adjusted for that with a little dial up top. Now, with this, you want to make sure, again, that you are still in manual mode. Everything is always going to be shot in manual mode. Right there in the top corner, you'll see the M. Always make sure it's at manual mode. Now, you want to raise up your shutter speed a little bit more to capture less light. You want to raise up your aperture a little bit more to capture a little more of that background. But then you want to lower your ISO even more to adjust for that light that's hitting those buildings or those areas really strongly. It's going to be really important that you do that so you're not getting an overwhelming amount of light from the buildings because the buildings are already bright enough and there's not much light that you need to bring in to add to make the photo as bright. You might think you might need to do that, you really don't. Now, let's go ahead and get ready to take some photos, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.